Hi everyone, welcome back to We Students. Today we're here with Miss Irena Filkova. She's our college counselor, and we're going to talk about university applications.
So, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay. First, thank you for having me here. I really love your concept. I watch your every show. I think it's very cool what you're doing for
Thank
students.
you.
In terms of introducing myself, so for those that don't know me, I'm Irena Filkova. I'm a college counselor at Nova International School, Skopje. I have been at Nova, I feel like forever. I think this is my 22nd year. I did not start working as a college counselor. I was initially an English language and literature teacher and public speaking teacher, ran the debate club in the school. And then in 2012, the principal approached me and asked me if he would like me to basically become a college counselor because more and more students began expressing interest in studying abroad. And we felt we needed a more structured approach to support them in their college journey. So I attended professional development session in Washington for the college board. Basically, it was like a summer institute for new counselors. We started as a team of 3 counselors, and over the years, the composition of the counseling team changed, but I stayed in all its iterations. And then we first started working with seniors, doing the split model, then we encompassed the juniors. And then we developed a whole comprehensive counseling program. And then in 2016, we introduced the model that you are now familiar with. So we have this structured weekly counseling classes, starting from grade 9 all the way to grade 12, and individual one-on-one support.
What inspired you to be a college counselor, and what is the aspect of your job that you like the most?
For a while, I did both teaching and counseling. And while I very much enjoy teaching in the classroom, I feel like in college counseling, I discovered my true calling. I really find it a very rewarding profession with a very lasting and tangible impact. I love working with students because I think it's a privilege to watch young people grow in a very formative period of their lives, to be that guiding influence as they figure out what they want, what they're interested in, their passions. And because I have a very personal approach to counseling, I tend to maintain these relationships well after students graduate. So it is not uncommon for students to reach out to me way after they graduated and ask me for help and assistance with their CV, with their cover letter, their motivation letter for postgraduate studies, for their PhD. And I just love to see what they do way after they graduate. I think it's very important to maintain an active alumni network because now that we're in our 27th year of existence, that connection to the school is important for the current students so that you can also learn from the people that were once in your shoes, right? So they can share their student perspectives and experiences about their educational journey, about their career trajectory. So just to give you some insight from a student perspective as well. And I also like that it's a very dynamic profession. So it's very evolving field. So I need to learn new things every day. And I love that life learning aspect of it. So it's never boring. So it might be time consuming, but ultimately, yeah, very rewarding, even if nerve wracking at times.
Firstly, can you tell us what are some of the differences between a counselor and an agent?
Okay. First of all, there are school-based counselors, such as myself. Then there are independent educational consultants, or ICs, or some people know them as private counselors, and then agents. So the difference between them is that an independent educational counselor or private counselor, if ethical and professional, should be working in the best interest of the students. So this is somebody that some students decide to hire outside of a school setting to work more closely on their individual applications. In an ideal scenario where the independent educational consultants follow the same ethical guidelines and best practices that we as school counselors are subscribed to, they need to collaborate with the school counselors. So it's a collaborative effort in which they support the best interest of the students. So their focus is on fit and on really finding the right colleges for the students and guiding the student through all aspects of the application process. Now, the issue arises when there are unethical independent educational consultants who basically do not work in the best interest of the student, or maybe they don't have the knowledge or the professional expertise to best support the student, and then some complications can arise, and especially if they don't collaborate with the school counselors, so they have like very different approaches and might give conflicting advice, which would ultimately not be in the best interest of the student. Agents, on the other hand, they basically work as representatives of particular universities that they establish partnerships with, and they work on a commission. So basically their interest is to get as many students as possible in a particular school, so that their services, they might do them for money. So it may be paid, or they may not charge you as part of the advising process, but once they get you into that school, they would receive a certain percentage for each admitted student. So it's very important, should students choose to work outside of school with a counselor, first of all, to know that it's a counselor and not an agent. So they need to ask this very clearly, to ask the counselor about their professional expertise, their knowledge. Are they members of particular professional associations, for example? So what is their counseling background? Are they familiar with different educational systems? Because some of the issues that may arise is, for example, when counselors give college lists that are not in line with the student's academic profile. So then the students risk being rejected, and that would not be the right fit. Or they may cause issues in the application process itself, and then the school-based counselor needs to address. This is a concept, like individual college counselors, is more common in America, as you know, especially public schools, where the school-based counselor's caseload is much bigger than what we have in our school. So if you're in Arizona, for example, in many public schools, there is just one school-based counselor working with 500, 600 students. So that person might meet the student only once or twice. So it's very difficult for them to establish like a close collaboration. And if a student needs more support, then it would be difficult to get it from the school-based counselor. So in that sense, I understand those that are able to afford it, because that can also be an expensive business. They would hire private counselors so they can help guide them through the application. However, in private independent schools, or where the school-based counselor's workload is not that big, the counselor has the opportunity to get to know the students closely. He knows the specific school context, right, and is able to guide them through all aspects. So it's okay if they want to hire somebody, that's always the student's choice, but they should always inform the school-based counselors. They need to be in constant collaboration and in touch, that they are all guiding the student in the same direction, and understand that we don't issue school-based documents, recommendation letters and such directly to agents or to independent counselors. They always come from the school, because this is what the universities expect.
You might not want to answer this, but if there's any students who you've counseled from the school that have had their own agents or their own counselors outside of Nova, have you ever run into some issues from uncollaborative agents that haven't reached out to you to let you know about this?
Yes. So there were some that were working last year, and there is a sizable number, for example, this year, who are using the services of one and the same agent. However, I have not had touch with that agent, although my door is always open, and there were several complications working with that particular one. For example, the agent got the CB school's code wrong for one student, so then his application could not be linked to our school, and this delayed the sending of the documents to the universities by a month. Or, for example, the agent gave information to a student that only the predicted grades were important, so they need to be like high enough, but then the actual final grades are not that important to obtain an unconditional offer from a UK university. In another case, a student was working with a private counselor who claimed to have sent documents to the university that was on the Common application, and there is no way that that could have happened, because Cialfo, the platform that we use, and the Common app are integrated, and only a school-based counselor can send them. So that's why the student was wondering why they did not receive a response from the university months and months on end. So these are like some issues. And then for me, the most worrisome issue is that, let's say those students that work with the same agent, they're a very different profile. And then many of them received very similar college lists. So they were like one and the same schools that were circulating on the list. And students, for example, who had average IB results might receive recommendation letters like, let's apply to Columbia or the University of Southern California, right? Which to me is like a red flag. So as I said, like every student has the right to hire additional help if they feel that they need it, but they really need to do a thorough background check of the person to understand that they really serve their best interests, because fit is uppermost in my mind. To have like a fixed salary, I don't benefit from recommending this or that college to you, right? So they really need to understand that the private counselor also has that fit factor, you know, uppermost in their practice as well.
So what would you say is the biggest mistake that students make in their applications?
Just one?
Some of them.
Some of them. Okay, well, first of all, I would say maybe not doing thorough research in terms of admission requirements or entry requirements, and not really minding their academic profile in relation to those requirements. So I had a couple of students, for example, who didn't do a thorough checkup, and they didn't realize that they needed a particular admissions test, or they did not have sufficiently high scores for a particular university that automatically canceled their application. Then procrastinating, for example. I mean, that's a normal human urge, I guess. But if you really wait till the last minute, this would also impact the quality of the application. So I think starting early, especially if you're applying to systems that are as complex as the US one, or if you're applying to multiple destinations with different application timelines, you really need to get documents ready on time. So I really think you need to start earlier in the whole process. And also, it's an individual journey. So I don't think you should be applying because your friends are applying there, because your boyfriend or your girlfriend are applying there, because those are all like very mutable categories. And even if students are thinking like, I might take a gap year, for example, next year, you know, I need a break or something, I always advise them, why don't we apply now to a couple of places so that you have options, and then let's revisit them in the spring and see, for example, if you still feel the same way. So just to have options. I'm always in favor of A, B, and C option.
Do you think a lot of people are choosing to go to places just because of their friends?
Yes, definitely. And
how does that impact them in the long run?
It does impact them. I mean, I understand the feeling that, you know, you want to know somebody. When you go to a foreign country, you're on your own at 18, so there's a lot of adjustment that needs to be made. So, you know, it would be practical to at least know one person, maybe a roommate situation. However, those things are very mutable. So they might break their friendship, or, you know, there are a lot of things that can change. Also, like, in terms of like following, you know, a current romantic interest. I had situations even when I was in high school. I graduated from Urza Nikolov when one of my good friends was in a relationship with a girl who went to study in France. First, they were incurring like very expensive bills for phone calls. And then his mom said, eventually, you know, you might as well go and study in France. Like the amount of money we're giving for these phone calls, you might as well go there. And then he went there, and within a couple of months, they broke up. And then the girl found the program that she was studying very difficult. She didn't really know that much French. So she came back, and he stayed, and he's still there, graduated from France, lives there, works there, you know, married there. So, you know, there are a lot of things that can change, you know. So that's why I'm saying, I know now you feel things strongly and you feel like this is it, right? And it's very hard, you know, to choose your own path, and on your own it can be intimidating. I understand that, but you will also make friends in the new destination where you go without forgoing your old ones. Maybe the friendships will evolve, right? The format will change, the frequency of seeing each other, but at least nowadays there are so many modes in which you can maintain those connections. So that's why I'm saying you should really factor in your own individual non-negotiables, not just because somebody else is applying there.
Okay, so there's a lot of debate about what colleges value most. So how do grades, extracurriculars, essays, and test scores compare in importance?
Okay. So first of all, you probably know that there are two types of systems. One is credentials driven, and the other one is holistic. So in credential driven systems, the application is largely based on the academic record of the student. So mostly the high school grades, the rigor of the high school curriculum. So they may not even ask for recommendation letters or a CV. So it would largely be like satisfying the entry requirements. However, in a holistic model, then all of these factors are taken into account. However, for every single model, the two most important factors are high school grades, so what you have done, your performance over the 4 years in high school, and also rigor or the strength of the high school curriculum. In other words, they want to see in the educational context in which you're at and the programs that the school offers, how much or to what extent you've challenged yourself. So for example, if we're offering the IB program, did you take, you know, the most challenging classes within the IB program that aligns with your profile? So if, for example, you stepped out of the IB program, right, and you're an IB certificate student and we do offer the full diploma, they might ask why. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's like one reason. So they do want to see, they always read this document that we call the school profile, which is basically a breakdown of our school, explaining what the school is about, what programs we offer, where our students enroll, what are their test scores in IB, SAT. So they get a breakdown of what extracurricular activities we offer. So all of those things. So they read your application contextually. So to see what kind of classes you're taking. In the past, when we offered AP classes as well, they would see how many APs you took. Did you take the more difficult APs, right? So that would also be a point of, you know, evaluation. After this, I would say it's something that universities call personal characteristics. So that may take the form of leadership or, for example, community service involvement, or intellectual zest, maturity of thought, like what aspects that you bring on the table that might contribute to the community that you want to become a part of. And then it would be the extracurricular engagement. So what are you doing with your time outside of the classroom? And we'll discuss later, how important those are and whether quantity is more important or quality. And then the more selective the school is, as a general rule of thumb, the counselor and the teacher recommendation letters are also valued and important. And then I would say in terms of standardized testing, while in the past, before COVID, when it was a test required landscape, the SAT, the ACT scores were pretty high on the list right after high school grades and college rigor. But nowadays, because so many schools have gone test optional, that is lower down the list in terms of importance that universities ascribe. So it's very important to see what kind of system you're applying to, whether you need to do all of these things or you just need to focus on your academic performance, for example, right? It really depends on the school. Private universities, the more selective ones, they would take all of these factors more into account, while public ones, for example, would care more just about the academic record. And you can do like a host of extracurricular activities, you can be like captain of the team or whatever not, but if you have a 2.0 GPA, that is not going to cut it, right? So grades matter.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier that the two most important things are the grades and the subject or how difficult your program is. What about people who are from like public school? They all take the state matura,
right? And they will not be discriminated or disqualified because again, they will understand that that school offers just the state matura model. So there may not be choices there. So a student would never be penalized by a university if he's not taking a class that is simply not offered in that particular program. If a student is targeting a holistic educational system, they can boost their profile by doing things outside of the classroom. Right? So whether that takes the form of internships or summer programs or taking some courses outside of the school, they can do that. But they would never be penalized or disadvantaged because that is simply the system, right? In the school, that is the program that is being offered. It's always very contextual reading of the applications.
So you mentioned extracurriculars as part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
How do students make their extracurriculars stand out? Is it better to have a long list of extracurriculars or some that like are
more meaningful
and longer?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say in this case, it's always quality over quantity. So you should not be chasing a million different little things that you do for a couple of hours. It should always be sustained long-term commitment to a couple of activities that demonstrate really your interest and your passion. Some students are not in a position, for example, to pursue more extracurricular activities. It really depends on your educational context, the socioeconomic context, so whether the school, for example, offers any clubs or extracurriculars, and also your financial situation, right? Or whether you have the time to pursue them. So I would always say that sometimes less is more. So you should really focus on the things that bring you joy and interest. Never do them just to check, some metaphorical box on a college list. Pursue them authentically and passionately, and this will stand out in your application. So there are some universities in the US that have actually cut the number of activities that you can report. So on the Common App, as you know, there are like maximum 10 slots, and a couple of universities have basically made the cut at the 6th, just to indicate that, students should really focus on that quality aspect. I would say in grade 9 and 10, as you're just beginning your high school journey, it makes sense to do research, to try things out, to see what it is that you like, that you don't like. So you may try different things. But then in the last 2 years of high school, you should really focus just on the ones that truly matter to you, that you find fulfilling, that are related to an interest of yours, right? So you should just do the ones that really matter to you. So sustained commitment to a couple is way more important than just being all over the place.
Yeah, we've talked about this, about how much we regret some of the things that we've done for the CV. Because, for example, I did first aid trainings in second year just because it was offered, and then that goes nowhere on my application because I'm not even applying to anything medicine related at all.
Yeah, because at the time, I guess you didn't even know, right?
I was also talking to my cousin. He asked, do I need to have 10 extracurriculars? And I explained to him that I didn't know this at the time, but I did so many extracurriculars because I thought there was going to be a list and I have to write everything down, and then I
Whoever
applied
has more.
Yeah, and then I applied to UK, and the only place where I mentioned them was
Right.
my personal statement,
Exactly.
and that's it.
And even in the personal statement, they only care about the supracurricular activities that are directly related to what it is that you're studying. I mean, whether you were an excellent volleyball player or, you know, the leader in, you know, some camp, they really don't mind, right? So it's really just about what is connected to architecture, for example, right?
Yes.
So, and I would also say that university officers, especially for holistic systems, don't have a preference for a particular activity over another. All right, so every student's context is different. So it's not like attending a summer program would be considered more valued than family responsibilities, for example. If somebody has tons of younger siblings, so they need to take care of them, right? That would also be considered valuable, right? So it's not about the type of activity, it's more about what you do with your time and that you really pursue an interest of yours.
Okay, so in terms of college essays, they can be overwhelming for a lot of students, since especially in the US, they take a lot of time and there's more supplements. What's your advice for writing a strong personal statement?
Okay. Well, first of all, not to wait till last minute. Many students do that. They might even start writing the supplementary essays first, and then they just postpone the writing of the personal statement. They think it's a monumental, intimidating task. And you're asking yourself, how am I to capture the essence of who I am and to relay that to the university officers in this limited word count? So first of all, you should know that writing is a process and it needs to undergo multiple drafts. That's one thing. Another thing is not to obsess too much with the topic itself. The topic is you. So whether the prompts are phrased differently, whether it's about a challenge you've addressed or a particular identity aspect of yours, it doesn't really matter. The topic is you. I have students, for example, who first write the personal statement and then they choose the prompt that the personal statement relates to best. And you should start by brainstorming. So little chunks. For example, there are a number of exercises you can use to try to figure out what it is you might want to write about. You can do the so-called values exercise. I don't know if you've heard of Ethan Sawyer, the college essay guy. So he has this whole blog and a website and videos and all. He's great. So he has a lot of like very practical advice, like what things matter to you. Then you list your values, for example, or if there is a particular aspect of your identity, or there is a very cool exercise called the objects exercise. And they say like, list 5 objects you see in your room that really matter something to you and what they represent. So it's like a number of things just to get you in the mode to brainstorm and to see what it is that I might write about. It needn't be a tragedy, for example, right? Or something monumental that happened. There are a lot of high school students who say, well, nothing major like happened in my life, right? I'm just like a normal high school student, right? I mean, but what I'm saying is that the essay can be about a very mundane topic, right? But then you just have a very interesting twist in which you say it. And it shouldn't be your entire biography, your entire life. After all, it's like 650 words, right? So you should just focus on one aspect and narrate that in a show kind of not tell method. So it needs to even include, you know, vivid vocabulary, active verbs, even dialogue. You can play with the format, right? And the expression, you know, oftentimes university officers say voice, right? It's the importance of the student voice. What that means, the essay should sound like you. You should not be using, I don't know, like 17th century vocabulary, right, in your essay just to appear more smart, if that is not the way you normally express yourself, right? Also, when you ask feedback, I would say ask a couple of trusted individuals, maybe friends, a counselor, even a family member, to ask them, does this sound like me? But also you should not overdo it with the feedback, because if you ask like 20 different people, then you're bound to receive 20 different perspectives and conflicting advice, which might make your job more difficult, right? So just to understand that the personal statement is, let's say, like the metaphorical heart of your entire application, and it needs to tie all other aspects of the application together. So whatever you discuss in the personal statement is your personal story. So there is one counselor who once said, if I find your personal statement printed on the floor and it doesn't have your name on it, and if somebody read it, and if they say like this person is Galan or this person is Sara, then you did your job well.
So I wanted to ask, how important is the way the recommendation letter is written? Would you be like penalized for like a badly written recommendation letter? Because I know for public schools, they don't have a counselor to write them. The teachers usually refuse because they don't know how to write one. So how important is it?
Yeah, definitely public school students face more challenges than private school ones when it comes to securing a recommendation letter, because it's simply not part of their school practice, or maybe they don't have an assigned counselor to work with them. So I would say they need to make the best of the situation, and that university officers are understanding of the particular circumstances or the context that the student comes from. So a student would definitely not be penalized if they're unable to secure a letter from the school, or if it's not up to their standards. They might ask for a recommender from outside of the school, whether a coach or a mentor, or they can help their case by trying to write a pretty detailed info sheet and give that to the teacher, or say to the teacher to write it in Macedonian and then to have it translated in English. And if they don't have a counselor, as they typically don't in a public school system, they can ask the school principal or the psychologist or the pedagogue or whoever they have in the administration to write a letter for them. So it depends on the system, but they do need to try that. I know that in some public schools, the teachers might even ask the students to write the letters themselves, right? And then they just need to undersign it and just put a school stamp on it. But I think it's best if they try to collaborate. Years ago, I had a student who transferred at Nova just for his final year. He was studying at Orza Nikolov and he wanted to apply for medicine. So he needed his chemistry teacher's rec. And I was working with her. She was teaching him in Orza in grade 11. And I worked with her to be added on the common application. I translated her letter in English. So it can be done, right? But they just need some guidance and assistance from the student's hand. So the more selective, the more competitive the school is, the more important the recommendation letters are. So you should really pick your recommenders carefully.
Because you said that there's some public schools who let the students write their own, do you think that it's very visible? Like that it's very, like a university counselor would be able to tell when they're reading an application that this isn't from a teacher but from a student?
They have a very good nose for those things because they can see whether the person expressing themselves is an adult or a teenager. So I would really recommend not to do that as a practice if possible, to be avoided, and to try to work with the administration to have it written by an adult. It's not about the length of the letter. Basically, most university officers would say just one page is enough. If it really goes on the second page, it really has to be a good reason for it. So they shouldn't obsess. Even like 2 paragraphs with one anecdote, something very specific about the student would be enough. So it's not about length.
So what is some advice you can give to students who are applying to multiple destinations and have more application timelines that they need to follow?
Okay, so that definitely requires more planning, a more structured approach, and again, starting early to do their homework. I would say to start at the end of grade 11 and to do more thorough research during the summer, because it is really difficult to navigate all of those things, right? Because some application deadlines, as you know, come very early. So depending on your aspirations, they might be even as early as October. And I would say to work strategically, one application or one destination at a time. And sometimes you also need to plan how to streamline the application timelines, because as you know, decision outcomes arrive at different times. And you might be in a position where a university is asking you to confirm your spot within a very limited amount of time while you're still awaiting for decisions from another school, right? And if this is not your first choice, and you need to submit a deposit, you need to make some decisions, right? You can ask the school for an extension. Most schools would grant it within a couple of weeks or a month, right? But if there comes a point where you need to decide, if it's a smaller deposit, you might risk forfeiting it. But if it's a sizable one, and there are some schools that might ask for €1,500 or €3,000, right, for a deposit, which is quite big, then you need to make some choices. So just to plan when to submit an application and what is your priority destination. For example, students applying to Italy for medicine, that is like a very late timeline because they need to take the IMAT test in September. The results come out in October. The school year starts in November. So it's like very difficult for that person to actually go to any other place other than enroll maybe at a university here in the country. Because for all the other destinations, at one point, you need to confirm the spot, pay the full tuition, apply for a student visa. So just to know when to submit the application as well.
So what's the best way to research and find the college which is like your best fit, and what are the most important aspects to consider?
Okay, that's my favorite question. I can speak for hours. Well, I think it's such a central part of my counseling philosophy, right? Yes, yeah, I actually started talking about fit since grade 9 because I really think it's very important. So when I talk about fit, I mean academic fit, social fit, and financial fit. So those three factors, I think, are crucial. Even if you break down the word fit, what each letter stands for. So F can stand for all the factors that go into the college search. I is for individual.
She's thought about this for so long.
Honestly, I can be like a motivational speaker for fit. And then T would be the tools that help you do the research. Oftentimes, when we talk about finding the right fit or factors that go into the search, you can think of it like searching for a house. Like, what are the parameters? What are the things that matter to me in my house search, right? So I can talk about the 5 P's, as they call them. So one is like person, and then people, program, place, and price. So those are like all 5 things you should consider. So in terms of person, think about who you are. So starting the search for university actually starts with a lot of self-reflection and knowing who you are. That's why in our system, in the first years of high school, we do so many personality and career assessments that would help you figure out who you are, right? So when you're doing like a self-survey to realize what are the things that matter to you, what are the non-negotiables that you really want to see reflected in your undergraduate experience. So think about your individual learning style, for example. How do you learn, right? Think about the kind of assessments you would like to do. Do you want to be part of a small classroom, or would you be more comfortable in a big auditorium with a lot of students, right? Do you want to attend a private university or a public one? Because there are differences in terms of size, you know? I would say it's very odd for somebody to apply, let's say, to a small liberal arts college in the US and at the same time apply to a huge public school in the US, because, you know, it's a very different experience when you go to a school with 1,500 students that are all undergraduate, and then when you go to a school with 50,000 students at all levels, right? So it's a very different kind of experience. So that's something to be mindful of. And then in terms of your values, for example, or parts of your identity aspects that matter to you. So you may have some aspects of your identity along the lines of race or ethnicity or nationality or sexual orientation or gender identity. So you would like to feel like you belong, that you're accepted in a particular place where you go. And then in terms of activities that you do, maybe you want to continue with those activities at the undergraduate level as well. Does the university offer those things? So those are like really important aspects on the personal side. When I say people, I mean, what kind of people do you want to associate yourself with? So basically the student body composition, for example, what kind of students they are. I think just by looking at the website of the university under the student life section, the kind of activities that they're engaged in, what they do over the weekend, so how they spend their free time, that would give you like a good sense. For example, is it a very sports-oriented culture? Are their social activities largely, you know, based on that? You know, is it a culture where they have a lot of parties, right? So what kind of students do you want to associate yourself with? Because those are the people you'll be spending 4 years with, right? So that is like really important, the people. In terms of the program, right? That is probably the most important aspect to you when you search now. So what kind of majors they offer, minors, you know, what combinations you can take. Is there flexibility in the program? Can you change a major? Is it 3 years, 4 years, right? Is it a core curriculum, open curriculum, interdisciplinary, like liberal arts curriculum? Do you dive straight into the program of your interest? So that's very important. Are there opportunities for an internship, for a study abroad, partnership, universities, career prospects? You know, what are the support systems available? If a student has, for example, a learning difference, right? Are there academic centers, you know, and learning disability office that would help that student transition, right, and adapt? So those things in terms of the program are really, really important. So that is probably a central aspect. Then in terms of the place, location is very important, both in a very physical sense, but also in a metaphorical sense. So geographically, where is the place positioned? Are you a person who would like to be in an urban kind of environment, in a metropolitan, big sprawling city, right? Do you thrive on that, right? Some people would enjoy it, others would be terrified, or they would feel distracted, right? So maybe a suburban setting, so maybe like a college experience, but still close to the city, or maybe something quieter in the rural area, right? So that is very important that students don't sometimes think about. I had a student who's a very urban type, and his dad thought that all the US universities were like that. And then he was accepted in a place which was in New York, but not New York City, but the state of New York, in a very far-flung rural area. And then within a week, I got an email from the father saying, like, I'm very sorry, I did not listen to you. I thought that America was, New York or LA, where did I send this, my son? Like, this is a wasteland, and, the person came back here, so it was not a successful experience. So really thinking about location, right? Transport on a daily basis. So how will you move about, right? Is it close to, to a public transport system? Do you need a car? There are some universities where unless you drive or you have a friend who drives, you can't really get to places, affordability of the transport. How far is the nearest airport? How often do you plan to go home or to have like family and friends visit? So that's important. So all of those things about location, weather, okay, so that is very important too. For some people it's not, for some it is, and it can really impact your overall kind of experience. I know people who exclusively choose destinations because of the climate. I had a person who said, I'm only applying to Italy and Spain because I really need the sun, all right? So that's a factor as well. So just to be mindful of those things as well.
What about the campus?
Campus, right? I mean, what they call like the vibe, right, of a place. Now, I know as international students, not many of you, because of our sheer geographic location, get a chance to actually visit the universities to get a sense. Many students like first set foot on a campus on the very first day of new student orientation, right? But there are ways in which you can learn. Thanks to COVID, at least we have a lot of, virtual offering and tours that are really, as close as it can get to a direct one. But also you can speak to current students there or students that finished. There are a lot of universities in Europe that use this like unibuddy system. So they match you up with a current student. So you can talk directly to somebody, even in your program, to learn about yes, and also you can ask, alums. As you know, from our school, I often get people who graduated to come and talk to you about their experiences. And the final one, which in my experience, in 90% of the cases turns to be the most important factor, is price. So basically the cost of attendance, that can be like a really determining factor. Like my motto as a counselor is like, go where the money is. I don't think that you should go bankrupt, to have like a quality undergraduate experience. So that should really be a conversation that you have with your families, right? As you make those choices, and that should really drive, not just the program, like you can fall in love with a place, you may even get accepted to a place, but if you cannot afford the place, you will ultimately not go to the place. So I've had people who were accepted, say NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, right? But that was their dream school, but NYU is notoriously stingy when it comes to funding international students. So the money that they gave the student was not enough, and simply the student could not go. So that's why I'm saying like the financial part is also very important. So think of all of these factors as you do the search, and there are a lot of search engines, country-specific ones, where you can dive right into it. And just to not obsess over the ranking or the name of the school, the perceived prestige or reputation, because there is no such thing as best college for everyone. There is a thing like a best college for you. So an environment where you might thrive and be, successful may not be the place for your friend. So it's like a very different kind of experience. That's why I give this research assignment when you're like searching for colleges in grade 11, like give me your top 3 choices, but then give me like 5 personal reasons why you think that you are a good fit for the school, right? Not because the school is, prestigious or highly ranked, but why do you see yourself in the context of that school? Because it's basically like a matching game, right? So the school also needs to like you just as much as you like the school. So what do you bring on the table in terms of like a value proposition, I would say?
Good.
Decent.
Honestly, I chose my colleges based on their campus. I don't know
how it looks, whether it's
I have people who chose based on the food in the cafeteria, party culture, like weather,
So many students wonder about the early action or early decision. Who should apply early, who shouldn't? Because I don't know a lot about that either, because that's only for US,
the
right?
US, right? Yeah.
So explain about that.
Okay.
The differences.
Yeah, so there are different application plans in the US. Not every university offers all of them, but in general, there's early action when you apply earlier by November 1st. Then there is early decision. and there can be early decision 1 or early decision 2 plan, and then there is the regular decision cycle, which is typically later. So when you choose to apply, does impact the outcome of your application. So for early action, I would recommend that for a student who has done their research thoroughly prior, who know pretty well the schools. They understand that this is a school that is really their top choice. They believe that they have a good chance of admission there, so their profile aligns with the school. They have strong grades. At the end of grade 11, they have strong grades, so they don't need to work on getting their grades better in the first semester of senior year to increase their chances of being accepted. So if they present as a strong applicant overall, and they've done their homework and their research, then they can apply early, because it is a fact that during the early action or early decision round, the admission chances are higher. They do accept more students.
What
However,
if they reject you?
well, that can happen too as well, but I will tell you why that happens. I mean, the difference between early action and early decision is that early action is non-binding. So it's just like a commitment on your part to demonstrate interest, to say, I would like to submit an application earlier, learn if I will be accepted earlier, typically by mid-December or January, February 1st at the latest, right, depending on the school. So do I have a chance, right? Early decision is binding. It means that if you apply to this school, you commit to attending the school if you get accepted. You basically sign an agreement, your parents sign an agreement, and I as a counselor sign an agreement. So it does have those implications.
What happens if you don't go?
So the only situation in which you may be released from the early decision agreement is if, for example, they don't offer you a high enough financial aid package that would not enable you to attend. So if you cannot afford the school, of course, they're not going to make you go, right? If you cannot pay for it, that's like the only reason. That's why I say students that are high needs, who really need substantial financial aid, should not apply early decision, because it's a risky proposition. You don't know how much money they may offer you, because most of the schools are need aware for international students. There are only 9 schools that are need blind for international students. So basically, if they don't give you enough money, then you can't really attend the school. Also, you don't have the benefit of evaluating, comparing, and contrasting other potential financial aid packages you would receive from other schools in the regular decision cycle. I would say the early decision primarily advantages students that are academically strong, but also have the means. All right. So if you're from, that is the reality, right?
Yeah,
so if you can afford the university, if you have a substantial, expected family contribution, and you present as a strong student, your odds of being accepted are much higher. If, for example, you are asking for a sizable amount of money, it is very common for international students to be deferred in the regular admission cycle. So in other words, to have their application evaluated one more time. You should not rush to apply early if you don't feel ready. Some students do need more time to do the research. They maybe feel pressure to commit. I don't think that you should strategize and just to apply to a school because your chances of acceptance are potentially higher if you don't really feel like you're ready to commit to the school, or you just need more time to research choices and options, right? So that's why you should really think about it. If not, you apply in the regular admission cycle. And I would say the early decision route actually benefits universities the most, because they can fill up to half of their class from the early decision pool. And it is a fact that colleges at the end of the day, or businesses as well, they do want to predict yield, who is likely to enroll. They do want to plan a class and their budget and their strategy. So that's why the competition in the regular admission pool is fiercer. And you should also know that in the regular admission cycle, when you see a particular acceptance rate for a school, that may be different, the overall acceptance rate, from the acceptance rate for international students, which is even lower. So you do need to plan. I don't mean to depress you or anything, right? But I'm just saying you should really pick the plan that works for you.
How many schools should students apply to, and is there some kind of magic number that can help them decide?
Well, I don't think there's a magic number per se. As you know, our particular school puts a limit to the number of application, and I will tell you why we arrived at that decision. Our number is 10, though in reality it's more, because as you know, the UK counts as one application. You submit the same application to 5 of your choices. University of California system with its 9 campuses with the same application also counts as one. The Australia system counts as one. So in reality, you do have more choices. But the reason why we decided to limit this is so that students would actually focus on fit and basically apply mindfully and purposefully, and not just apply for the sake of applying, and also just collecting acceptances, right, and accolades. It should really be a balanced list, right? If you have done your research properly, you should have like 2 or 3 schools that are on the reach end. Okay, so it's fine if you have dreams and aspirations, right? They should still be grounded in reality, right? But I'm saying that it's fine if you have more selective schools, like a couple of them, and then about 4 or 5 that would really be target schools that really you feel that your applicant profile aligns with them and your chances of admission are pretty high, and then to have like a couple of schools that would be like safety options, because working on so many applications require a lot of time, not to mention effort and money as well. So there are application fees to be paid as well, right? So that's just something to be mindful of. Sometimes we allow students, every now and then, maybe a couple of students in each generation, to increase the number of applications, especially on grounds of financial aid. If they're targeting like selective universities, as international applicants in this very highly unpredictable college admissions landscape, just to have more chances and to cast the net wider. But I really honestly think if you do your job right, you don't need like more than 10 schools. It's like more than enough.
In terms of financial aid, like you just mentioned,
yeah.
What's your best advice for finding scholarships and applying to them?
Okay. Well, first of all, to make a distinction between merit aid and need-based aid, right? So merit aid is academic. So if you are an academically strong applicant, you may qualify for merit aid. Now, in some cases, the scholarships are automatically awarded just by reviewing your profile. If you're a strong enough applicant, right, they may decide to give you some money, right? And then there are merit scholarships where you actually need to write an essay, perhaps like a whole additional application, not just in the US, in Europe as well. Like students applying for a scholarship to ESADE, for example, those that went through the experience would know that the scholarship application is just as long, if not lengthier, than the actual application to being accepted, right? So it does take some work and effort on their end. And then the need-based scholarship is basically not on the merit of your academics, but basically the financial situation. And in this case, you need to submit a lot of documents, like tax return forms from the parents, bank statements, pay slips, like all of those things that would, present the financial situation of the family. On the basis of that, they would decide whether or not to award you money and how much. And some schools have a combination of a merit and need-based. So that is something that you really need to look into, how many scholarships they give, for example, or typically like what is the percentage of students that do get aid, and when they do get it, like what is like an average amount that is being given, because not every school operates with the same budget. Some schools have far bigger endowments and others have limited financial offering, and some would say to increase your chances of a scholarship, you should apply in the early round or as early as possible, because money are given on a first come first serve basis, right? So always the money part is something to be carefully researched.
For our government scholarship, would you recommend that students take it? Because I'm pretty sure it's merit-based.
Yes, it is merit-based. If you personally ask me, I think they should change it, and maybe it should be a combination of merit and need. But for the time being, it is merit-based. So basically, if you get accepted to the first 100 schools on the Shanghai list of rankings, if you have a letter of acceptance from those schools, your GPA is 4.5 in every academic year, so not the cumulative one. Yes, that's important. Then you would qualify for the government scholarship. If you accept it in the first 10, you can basically study whatever you like without any limitations. But if it's after 10, then they have like a list of areas that the government deem are maybe required for our country, like architecture, engineering, international law, finance, right? Biology, chemistry, genetics, medicine, like things like that. So you do need a major in that particular area. And the amount is $40,000, maximum amount per year. And they also give like a they cover living expenses. So they give you like a monthly allowance as well. They don't give you the money directly. They actually pay it on the account of the university. Now, in the conditions, the stipulations, you really need to read carefully. So basically, if upon graduating, you don't come back to the country and make yourself available to work for the administration, or if they don't offer you one for a private company, then they say that you either need to be employed in one of the first 500 companies on the Fortune magazine list, or if you want to go to a master degree program, you can do that, but it doesn't terminate your obligation, it just postpones it. or you can return twice the amount of money that you were given. This year, at least it's a more manageable amount. They say twice. Up until last year, it was 10 times the amount, which is really ridiculous.
We read that one and we were so scared.
Because if you really have the money, right, you would not be applying for the scholarship. One thing I see this year that is different other than this is that they have an electronic register. So I think they are trying to keep track of the people who are on the government scholarship in a more systematic manner, because truth be told, up until now,
a lot of people escaped from the obligations.
Right. So there are lots of students that had not returned. So, I mean, you can see it, on the one hand, like these are, our ambassadors for our country. They're promoting our intellectual potential, right? However, this is also money from the budget as well. So that's something to be mindful of. I would say use it if this is like your last resort, if you really want to go and study abroad, right? And if you have no other means, it's always best if you can either afford it or if you're granted directly money from the institution itself, right? But if this is like the only way to go.
And so if you return here either way, it's kind of a win-win. You're going to return here either way. So why not get the government scholarship?
Yeah, if that is the plan, right? If you don't mind coming back, right? It is a bit tricky, like for specific areas, like where our country is not like developed enough. If you want to study something like artificial intelligence or nuclear physics, like what are you going to do with that here, right? So it's more about the area.
Yeah, but you also get employed immediately, which is good because
in theory,
you don't always get employed immediately.
There are a lot of people who actually, they come back, they dutifully report to the government that they're available, and then within a 6-month period, they're not offered a position.
And then they have the right to leave, I think.
Yes.
Their obligation is terminated.
Yes.
So in terms of expectations, how do you suggest that students deal with like getting rejected or getting deferred, waitlisted, and so on?
Yeah, definitely applying to university is as much an emotional roller coaster ride as an academic one, I would say. And my job as a counselor, personally, I think that part is the most challenging, basically managing expectations of both the students and the families. And I think it's just being realistic, I would say, and objective, and balancing, academic aspirations and ambitions and one's profile versus the entry requirements or the admission requirements of a particular place. So sometimes the biggest disappointment comes when you're really shooting too high, right? Or let's say you might be the star of our school, right? But the world is a big place and you're competing against a lot of international students. And sometimes it's through no fault of your own whatsoever, right? You might turn out being waitlisted or rejected. Because just to contextualize, if you apply to a selective school like in the US, for example, or schools like London School of Economics that we mentioned, there they receive quite a lot of applications. So 50,000, 60,000 applications for 2,000 spots, right?
So you're telling me to get ready.
Okay. So, well, sometimes it's a matter of luck, even factors that have really nothing to do with you. It can be like demographics. I think actually the fact that we're from a small country in the Balkans works in our favor in terms of diversity of a class, right? Because those are factors that universities take into account. The US ones, they are crafting a class, all right? So they want students of different backgrounds, levels of ability, talents to join their community. And that would make the classroom experience of learning far, richer. So this is why they're looking for different profiles of students.
That's more for the US, right? The UK.
Yeah, definitely. I would say for the UK, for example, it's just the sheer volume of applications. So, and the limited number of spots, right? So one admission counselor once told me, like we selected this, say, 2,000 people, and we may just as well, scratch that and accept an entirely different batch of other 2,000 applicants, and that would still make a strong class, right? So it's not that, necessarily organically there's something wrong with your application. Sometimes it's like a lottery in the fit factor. So any given year, university might have a particular agenda, some important criteria for them to fulfill, right? Some aspects that they're taking into account. So all of these things influence the decision. In terms of diversity, like for the US, for example, the fact if they have a student from our school, or several in the previous years, that might limit your chances of being accepted unless you're a different profile, for example, in order to be accepted, precisely because of that representation kind of factor, demographics, like all of those things. So I do think that you should have a balanced list and realistic expectations, and to understand that rejection is a part of life, right? And it's not the end of the world, honestly. You should not feel like a failure. You should not use an acceptance or a rejection as a metric of who you are or your worth as a human being, right? It may feel personal because you have invested so much time in the applications, or you revealed and stripped your soul in all of those essays, right? But I'm saying that, there is more than one place where you can be happy, fulfilled, and successful. And as long as you are not intransigent in your views, if you really think this is the only place where I will be happy and fulfilled, I think that you will manage those different outcomes in a far better way. And I have a lot of students who wound up in a university that was not even originally on their list, or it was like lower down the list, and they discovered that this is the best place where they could have gone to. So I'm just saying to be like open and flexible, because it's more about what you do with a college experience rather than what the name of the school is. The name or the brand or the prestige of a school in itself can only get you so far. It's more about what you do with the experience.
Yeah. So gap years are now becoming more common and kind of like a trend. A lot of students are taking them. How can a student use a gap year effectively and then explain that in their application the next year?
Okay. Yes, I would say that there is a rise in interest in taking a gap year in recent years, especially since COVID, I would say. Previously was not so much a thing, especially for our cultural context. Most parents would see that as a waste of time. But I think that a well-structured, gap year can actually do wonders for a student who needs that one additional year to either explore or just need it for growth and insight. So it can take the form of an internship, it can be volunteering, community service, it can be like a summer program, it can be travel, research. So it's not about chilling for a year and not doing anything, right? But it's using it in a structured way. And if done right in this manner, if you basically use the time constructively, universities say that actually those students turn out to be far more successful in terms of their performance when they go to university. Research was conducted that if you pursue like gap year in this like structured, mindful way, you actually become more mature, more prepared, and more ready to tackle the academic challenges of the university. So sometimes students may need a breather. They may need to like figure out what it is that they want, right? Some told me I need a break from the IB, before I devote myself to the next 4 years of my life. That's okay, right? But you just need to plan what to do with your time. And if you're like applying during your gap year, you also need to make time for the application. Some students apply in the last year of high school, and then they may defer if the university allows that option, like US, UK, they would be okay with that. And then they would go to a gap year and then start their studies, or they may need to apply while they're taking the gap year. So that's just something to plan.
Wait, so if they apply while they're taking the gap year, who is their college counselor?
I'm still your college counselor. Really? Yes. So I've had, there are a number of students after graduating from Nova who are reapplying, either because they want to transfer or they want to start altogether. So even if they need my help, I'm still their counselor.
So it's the same process, just a year later.
It's just, the timeline is different.
With no IB exam stress.
Exactly. So, and you already have your final exams, right? So,
and you are more like realistic in terms of where you can apply.
Yeah.
If you could give just one piece of advice for the application process, what would it be?
Mm-hmm. I would say to start early and to be open and flexible. So that would be like the most important thing, because if you have like a tunnel vision at the very beginning of the college process, this might impact you in a negative way if things don't work out the way you envision them. So I just think that openness and flexibility in terms of choices is very important, and starting the process early and not procrastinating, I would say.
Also, I would want to give my advice to do research, because I applied to all honors programs in the UK, not knowing that that's a thing. And now I have to do, I think, extra credit as well. So it's you as well. You also did honors program, and I didn't know that.
But for mine, I think there wasn't any normal program for architecture in some of them. It was,
So it's really important to be aware of what you're applying.
Checking the entry requirements, the admission requirements before you apply, right? That would be like very important for sure.
So something similar to this, but what's one underrated piece of advice that students don't take seriously, but they really should?
Okay, well, this might sound silly, but I would say read email and read the fine print. Okay, because oftentimes students might, let's say, lose a chance at their dream school, although I don't like the term, but I would say that sometimes they miss out on things because they failed to read an email communication from the university because they had to take another second step after submitting the application. Maybe there was like a supplementary application they had to do, or a language proficiency test that they failed to take notes they need. I had a student who was accepted to the University of Edinburgh years ago, a very solid student, Boris Rajkovsky scholarship applicant, 5 APs like Calculus BC, all fives, like, you know, a very strong applicant who failed to take note that she needed TOEFL. So, and she only noticed this like a week before the deadline. And although the exam itself would have been like very easy for her to take, it's just that there wasn't any time for her to register and to take it. So just minding like what are the actual requirements is very important. I had students who were applying to a numerous fixes program in the Netherlands, where there are 2 steps to the procedure. So they need to take a selection test in order to be placed in the program. There's like a ranking list that is being published. So they first receive an email from the general admission office where the wording is slightly misleading. They say, congratulations, you have been conditionally admitted to, let's say, the international relations program at Groningen or something, right? And then the students cheer and they think their job is done, without realizing that basically what the letter is saying is, you are conditionally admissible, like we checked your background qualifications. In theory, you do qualify at the level of the general admissions office, but then you still need to take the selection test for your specific program at that department. And then they fail to read email. So I had a student at Leiden who was applying for international relations, who did not take note of that second email in which they were informing her that she had to take the selection test between the 3rd and the 5th of February. So she did not read that, she did not take the test, and her application was canceled. So it's very important to read that fine print, all right, not to miss steps. When you apply, wherever it is, there's a number of other things that you may need to do. So for the US, let's say there, or the UK, right, there's like an application portal that you have access to. And then they will tell you what other supplementary documents you may need to submit by a particular deadline. I was just recently dealing with a case like that where a student like failed to submit an initial transcript, you know, and then weeks afterwards she received a notification that the application was withdrawn. So you can't like ignore those things. If you are in doubt, always ask whether your counselor, or if you don't have a counselor, write directly to the university office. They're pretty, you know, helpful in the admissions office.
This just happened to me as well. I had a Greenwich interview, which I knew I had the interview. However, I had put it not for the 19th of February, but for the 20th. And it was like the day after mocks. I decided I'm going to chill today. It's going to be so nice. I'm talking to Ghana and she's like, oh, by the way, good night. Good luck on your interview tomorrow.
And you're like, what interview?
And she has access to my email. She's like, they're asking you for a portfolio by yesterday.
It's a good thing that she has an access there.
2 tasks, and also you have the interview tomorrow. I was so scared.
It's such a luck thing because she had used my email once because her phone wasn't working and she had needed to schedule an internal assessment meeting or something.
Right, so then you...
And from then I hadn't logged out because, you know, I never really used my Gmail. Unless it's on my laptop, I never open my email at all. I just have notifications in case something like this happens and they say, we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Please confirm your attendance. And they sent like 4 emails.
Yeah, 4 or 5 emails.
Follow-up emails.
The first 2 emails
She's
were
so
like,
disappointed right now.
Please. No, the first 2 emails were, we're so glad you're going to have an interview with us. We can't wait to see you. It was like, okay, thanks. Right. The second email, the same thing. And on the third one, they asked for a portfolio, the task, and whatever. But I did them overnight and I got accepted to Greenwich.
I'm happy it worked out, you know, that you managed to, you know, to do it on time. But yeah, some universities send like tons of email, and then in 1 or 2 of those, you can find some really important information.
Yeah, so it's,
I had people who were applying to medicine at Groningen. That program is no longer available in English as of this year, but when they did, there is a test. And they sent in one of those emails with lots of documents a link to the preparation materials for the test, typically like a month in advance. And these students were like, they did not send us any materials because they just failed to read the fine print and discovered there were materials like practice tests like 2 days ahead of the test. So, you know.
Yeah, I did that for Boston University. I know.
I mean, that really increases the stress, the anxiety.
Yeah, with the bank statement that I need to submit, like a TOEFL exemption form that apparently wasn't available anymore, but they still accepted my request, luckily.
I mean, some are flexible, you know, if you're lucky, right? But in some cases, they will just say, well, that's it, thank you, you know, better luck next time, you know? So I think, I think especially in the school environment where teachers frequently postpone assignments, you know, like, I know it feels like they're doing you a favor at the time, but that's not how the world operates. And there are some deadlines that are actual deadlines and cannot be missed.
So now we're going to move on to asking questions that have been submitted to us from followers on Instagram and on TikTok. Sure. And a lot of these are very specific to the individual student and their context. But there's one that we're going to start with, which was asked by an IB English examiner.
Examiner?
Yeah.
Oh, I was so happy when she commented because I watched all her videos.
She asks you, what's the best college essay you have ever read and what has made it stand out? You can take your time to think about this one since you read a lot of them every year.
Yeah. From our school? Or
from, in general, you can say from our school, from ones you've seen online, maybe.
I mean, definitely I've read excellent essays from our school as well. They're really personal, I would say. And especially I like a story, for example, which develops, you know, maybe like if there is like a metaphor that basically runs through the whole essay. And it's told in simple terms, but it's just the intellectual depth comes through the way that metaphor is developed. For example, I cannot reveal because I really think they're personal, so I wouldn't like share them, but it's always about some aspect, right, that is really like personal, and I can really like see the student when I'm like reading the story. And it's really not about a big life event or a major dramatic event. It's like really the simple things in life. For example, I remember years ago there was a student who was writing about him living at Bitpazar, for example, and then there's a tapestry, you know, of multiculturalism and how that impacted his identity, for example, right? Or, you know, something that was like really unique to the culture that the student came from, for example. So, or I had a student who was writing about how the absence of her father in her life impacted the way that she evolved as a person. I mean, the father was alive, but was working like abroad extensively. And I remember the essay starting with passport, tickets, goodbyes, like, you know, so every now and then it was in Afghanistan or Iraq, some kind of military base, you know, so it was like for safety reasons an issue as well. But she said, like, you know, my life is like a long collection of important moments like birthdays or celebrations that my father missed. But at the same time, you know, she spoke about responsibility, how she took care of her younger brother, how she grew more resilient, more independent as a result of that. I mean, of course, she is in contact with the father and shares the most important moments by phone or something, but it's just like the absence of such an important individual in her life, for example.
So interesting.
And you can read for inspirations. There are some essays that some universities publish on their web pages. Like I really like the essays from Johns Hopkins, for example, or Tufts University. They call them like essays that worked. And every year they publish like a couple of essays. And then there's like a review from the admissions officer why they liked that particular essay. So it's really, really personal. One student I remember years ago reading about it who got into like all 8 Ivy League schools, whatever, right? I have also like a comment on that, but you cannot be the right fit for all 8 of them because they're very different. But and I'm sure it's not just the essay, but it was like really about her. It was an American student like going through Costco, you know, like the supermarket, and just going and doing the shopping, you know, and just the items that she was putting in the basket. Like it can be like a very, very simple story, right? It doesn't have to be like something great. Or one of my students years ago, also applying in the US, was writing about a debate tournament that she was doing and how the judges were evaluating her. Basically, she was like a speaker on the negative side, but she evaluated her own performance from the perspective of a judge, for example. So that was like pretty interesting. And back in the days, there was also a student who was writing about herself by using the old SAT model, like ABCD, like, question and there's multiple choices, so it can be like creative. Yeah.
Long question. Next question. I don't know where this one is from. It doesn't matter.
Where this is going.
There's a lot of questions from students from our school as well.
Yeah, okay.
So is it frequent to see lies in recommendation letters, and do you mention it, or do you
report it? I guess.
Lies. You mean like in teacher recommendation letters?
Yes.
Or
in teacher ones? Oh, I thought they would. Okay.
Well, I always, as I said, make a habit of reading the teacher recommendation letters, and I do collaborate with my colleagues. So I give them feedback and I tell them, what they need to revise. I mean, teachers understand, at least our teachers, what a recommendation letter needs to contain. So they would not be using lies for sure. However, there are ways in which you can, I don't know, like embellish the truth, I would say. So I sometimes tell teachers, that, it actually works against the students' interest if they use hyperbolized, adjectives, this kind of effusive wording, great, fantastic, top of the class, like all of that, while the student may have an I before in the same class, right? So the letter of the recommender needs to match the grade, right?
Yeah,
so I'm saying that, they should not like overdo it. And every admissions officer will tell you that they prefer to read even just 2 paragraphs with a very specific example or an anecdote of what that student did in the classroom in a particular scenario over a long string of adjectives that are vague and can be applied to more than one student. So for whatever description you use, they say we want to see an example of that. So if you tell me that the student is a leader in the classroom, give me an example of that leadership, for example.
Yeah, show not tell.
Yeah, exactly.
What tools can we use to find universities tailored for specific majors?
Every country has their own search engine. Of course, there are general ones as well. Like, I don't know, you probably know like the bachelor's portal, for example. So if you put the name of the country and the particular major that you're interested in, like that would produce like a list of wherever it is that you want to go. But I think it's better if you just go by the particular search engine of that country. So let's say for the Netherlands, you have like the studyingpoland.nl tool. For Germany, you have like dat.de, right? So
we'll put them in
for the UK, yes. I shared once with you, I can share this with you again, like a list of all the search engines. So if you're targeting the US, like the College Board, Big Future website, College Navigator, Niche, right? All of those can be used. So I think it's best if you just use the specific search engines for that particular country. So they would have like the most information, and you can also plug in filters. So you can put like let's say your GPA, for example, or the major, or if there's like a test score, or, like some factors that are important to you. And if you use platforms like we do, like CAlpha, they also have the targeted search. I know that probably not many students are aware of this, but actually if you use that in the university search, you can basically narrow down
the
and customize it.
Also based on certain tests that you have given us to do, like for personality, it also writes how much of a fit the school is for you. And that was really interesting because I was looking at it after I had already applied, and to some universities that I thought like that I was a really good fit for, it was like a 40%.
No, actually, if you do all of those like personality, career assessments, you put the major, the factors that matter to you, like activities you're doing. So the more you feed it, basically, the more accurate the algorithm is, and then they might give you like tailored suggestions. Yeah.
What are the key elements I should include in my CV when applying to universities in the US or UK? And we already answered that. We said you can add anything as long as it's long-term and meaningful to you, right?
Yeah, but for UK, they matter more whether they match
your major, your course.
Oh, yes.
It's just like when you're applying for a graduate program, for example, or for a job. When you write it, you can also customize your resume, right? So you will highlight those activities that are in line with a specific program, or, so you wouldn't like put everything.
So UK, it needs to be more for the major you're applying to, and then for US,
it's just the top 10.
Yes, I mean, for the US, you would include like your relevant experiences. Again, on the Common App, they say you should list your activities in order of importance to you. So they also want to see what matters to you most from all the things that you've done. And there are a lot of supplementary essays where they actually ask you to elaborate at greater length about a particularly meaningful extracurricular activity. So it's not just something that you mindlessly list. I think order also matters, because this also gives them an indication of the type of person that you are and what values you have and what interests you have.
How do we know which exams we should sit for other than the IB final exams, such as the SAT, UCAT, BMAT?
BMAT is no
BMAT.
longer in the game, right? They terminated it. So if somebody wants to study medicine, for example, they need to take the UCAT. That's the only one now. In general, again, do the research, right? Read the entry requirements, familiarize yourself with the type of assessments that you need to take, because for some of these, you need to take them before you apply and to have the results. So that is the case with the UCAT, for example. You need to take it before applying, so based on your results. While for the LNET, as you know, you can apply and take it afterwards. So that timeline, so that you don't miss the test, is very important. For the SAT, if you are applying to test required schools, also knowing what sessions are in place, right? So it's not offered every single month. So to do planning, if you need to take it more than once, and what is the score that, universities require. And it's wrong to assume that the SAT is only required for the US universities. As you know, there are a lot of schools in Europe, Turkey, that might ask, Italy, right? Spain, that might ask for it. So there are a lot of students, even in your class, who had Bocconi initially on their list, right? And that is great. But they did not know that, for example, for the SAT, in order to be deemed competitive applicants, they need to have a minimum score of 1450 and above. So Bocconi is a really competitive school. They say you either need to take the SAT or their Bocconi online test. So 55% of the decision making relies on the test result. And then the other 45 is basically your GPA. So unless you have a competitive SAT score, you would not be considered. And then for ESADE, for University, you can either choose to take the SAT or their own admissions test. So it's very important to plan those things in advance.
Yeah, but these are also all listed in the requirements for each course.
As long as you read them, yes. For students from public schools, definitely like a language proficiency test, they need to take a TOEFL or an IELTS. They can check if Duolingo is accepted as well, because that's the most affordable. So that's very important. And also like translating all the documents in English or in the language of the country where they're planning on studying is important.
For public school students, I know for the UK, for us, for example, if we get above a certain grade for English, we can be exempt from TOEFL scores. Is it the same thing for the state matura?
No, because their medium of instruction is Macedonian or Albanian or Turkish, right? So it's not English. That is why. And the IB is an international qualification, and this is why it would be accepted as a cause for exemption from a language test. But if you are studying in a public school, you should be planning to take the TOEFL or the IELTS, and it should be like with 2 years validity.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to mention that for the LNET, for example, I realized that some schools don't even require it in the UK.
So there are LNET participating universities. I had a student who applied for law in the UK and went to study law, and she just picked schools where the LNET was not required.
So much easier.
So next question is, how should I prepare for university interviews, and what type of questions should I expect? I wish we did this podcast earlier before my Greenwich interview.
How did that go?
Well, but you were able to find YouTube videos with the Greenwich.
Yes, I found videos. That's how I prepared. I prepared the night before, as I said earlier, but I went through my portfolio the night before because I'm in architecture, as everyone knows already.
By now, right?
I practiced questions from Google, Reddit, whatever it gave me. That's all I did. However, I still didn't feel prepared, and also I was caught very off guard by the interviewer because I didn't know, but sometimes they test you to see if you're gonna, like, for me, they told me, architecture is really hard and so many students fail, so we want to see if you're one of the students that's gonna like stay until the end. And so I felt like that was a personal attack to me, like, but it wasn't. It was just a test, and that's why I was so unprepared. So what is your advice?
Okay, so that depends on what country you're applying to, because interviews are very different depending on whether you're applying to the UK, the US, or some European universities. So the UK ones are very academic in nature. There are not that many UK universities that have an interview, but schools like Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial College, and then for some programs as well, talent-based programs, there may be an interview. So you should know that the interview is really academic. They don't, I mean, they really don't care that much who you are as a person. Honestly, it's more about your academic skills and abilities and your suitability for the particular course.
I didn't even introduce myself. You didn't ask me anything about myself.
You know, so they are more high stakes in that sense because they do want to see your suitability for the course. If you apply for Oxbridge, those interviews are conducted by actual professors from the department that you're applying to. And after the first 1 or 2 questions where they're meant to like relax you, like what's your name, how's your day, then they go straight to the point, right? Where they ask you very specific things about the field. And it's not about giving the right answer. It's more about seeing how you think and how you would operate in the specific seminar style environment that the Oxbridge tutorial system has. So it's like giving you like hypothetical scenarios where they want to hear you think out loud and in what direction you would go. And it's not about catching you off guard, right? Or cheating you into a trap, right? It's more about, you know, seeing how you would operate in that system. So those are like really academic. So that's why you really need to reread your personal statements. They might ask you questions from it, right? So it's really just about the subject. In the US, for example, just like some liberal arts programs in Europe, like university colleges in the Netherlands, for example, they might interview you. They're more holistic in nature and they're more about who you are as a person. So they're more conversational. Very few US universities have evaluative interviews. For example, Harvard is one such school. Like if you don't get an interview invite by the first week of February, that means you're not among the shortlisted candidates. For all the others, it's typically more of an informative nature. Oftentimes, the person interviewing you is an alum from the school. You know, it may be an admissions officer or somebody who recently graduated, but it can also be somebody who graduated, you know, like 30 years beforehand, right? So it's more about getting to know you. So you can also prepare questions. That would be the smart thing to do. So in addition to the interviewer, at the end, I think it's, you know, it's really bad if they ask you like anything to ask, you know, and you say like, no, I'm good, right? So you really do need to demonstrate interest, right?
That's
and,
what she did.
Yeah,
That's what I did.
ask questions, you know, that are not, you know, something you can find in the first 5 seconds from clicking on the website. So it should be like something specific to your own interest about fit. Maybe like doing research with a particular professor in the department or something about their organizations or student life or clubs, right? So suitability. And those interviews tend to evolve organically, right? So it's more like a conversation and maybe you'll have some shared interest with the interviewer, you know? So
Stefan does that.
Yeah, I mean, you can be relaxed in that sense, right? When you do those.
No, for me, when the interviewer asked me like, "Do you have any questions?"
Mm-hmm.
The night before I had prepared for the question, "Why the UK
Mm-hmm.
and why our school?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I had really strong reasons for both.
Okay.
I didn't get to say them because he didn't ask me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried to put them into the question when I asked him, so he knows like
that you're thinking about
yeah.
those things.
So that's what I tried to do because I had no other questions. I knew where I wanted to go, and that's that.
I haven't had an interview for the colleges, but I did a similar process for the research program that I took part in. And it was very US based, so I had more of the conversational style. Yeah. And it was so nice, and we all actually had something in common, that we read a book, the same book.
Ah, nice.
And we were able to talk about the author, and I think that's one of the main reasons why they accepted me into the research program. It was so good.
Yeah. No, honestly, I think it's a good sign if the interview runs beyond the typically scheduled time. So, you know, oftentimes for the US, like the interviewer would be given just the basic facts about you. He wouldn't have read like the whole application so that it wouldn't basically influence his impression of you. So they would just write notes. And I mean, for the most part, you know, unless you do terribly, you know, at an interview, it would not have an adverse impact on your application. So if, for example, the interview is optional, I would always say yes, I want to do an interview, because it does demonstrate interest. And sometimes they might not have a person to interview you in the region, and that's fine, but at least you should say that you are interested in having an interview. And then you have schools like IE, ESADE again, where the interview is one of those elements in the overall application process, where the questions may be, you know, from a problem-solving nature. They want to assess your critical thinking skills or your creative abilities, you know, how you think, in a particular hypothetical scenario. So, that's like a must for you to do.
For US universities, what standardized tests do I need to take, and what is the ideal score I should aim for?
Again, that depends, right? Because every university will have different requirements in terms of the SAT or the ACT. Some schools will be test required, others would be test optional. So they need to determine if they need the SAT, right, based on that. And also, if they do take the SAT, whether or not to submit it or whether to apply to that program at all is, by checking something called the common data set for every university. So if you type common data set, I don't know, Stanford University, right? They would give you a breakdown of the school. And among many other useful information, you would also see what is the typical average SAT score for the 25th percentile, the 75th percentile. And as a general rule of thumb, if you fall within the 50th percentile or you're above, then you should be submitting the SAT scores. If they're below, then you may choose not to. And I should say, even for test optional schools, just because they're test optional, that doesn't mean that if you're not submitting the SAT, you should just go and mindlessly apply. You still need to, to have your academic profile be a good match to all their requirements. And also for language proficiency tests, they would put on the website what specific minimum score they need for the TOEFL, for example, or the IELTS. So they should be targeting those. And some might even, let's say for the UK, universities have very specific requirements of what is the minimum score you should have for each of the 4 sections on the TOEFL. So that's also important.
I wanted to ask, in your opinion, I haven't checked anything online about this, but I wanted to ask you if you think that after the test optional thing happened,
yes,
do you think that the average SATs in different universities rose? Because for a lot of universities, it used to be, for example, 1500, 1520. And then after it was test optional, the medium, 50th percentile now is much higher.
It is because actually only the people who have high SAT scores submit the test. So what you see is not really an average, right? So it gives you a very different idea of what the SAT should be. So when it was test required, then you can see a range of scores. But nowadays, it's typically students with the highest SAT scores that submit.
Okay. The other 2 questions, one of them is about FIT, which we already talked about. And then, are there any specific exams or prep I should be aware of if I want to apply for medical programs in the US?
So first of all, you cannot go study medicine directly in the US as an international student. That's a professional program. So like some other fields, you can do pre-law, or you can do pre-medicine, right? So you don't take any tests then. It is afterwards for the medical school when you need to take a test. And in general, it's impossible as an international student, obviously, to be accepted directly into a medical program. It's very competitive. It's next to zero. Also for the UK, for example, many of our students find the UCAT test challenging because the scores that they need to get are pretty high. So very competitive. And also there is a quota for international students. So very few places available for medicine. So from my experience, there are very few of our students that manage to qualify directly for entry into medicine in the UK. So what they do is first they study something like biomedical sciences, for example, and then apply to med school. If somebody is really certain about wanting to go the medical route, I think Europe and English taught programs in medicine might make more sense because you have a single cycle degree. So within 5 or 6 years, you would have a medical degree. And for each of them, there is an entrance test. So for medicine, what you do on the test is the most important thing. So it's not so much the other aspects of the application. Sometimes it's the only important factor.
That's it for the questions. So that's it for the video as well.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you, Ms. Filkova, for coming.
Thank you. This was fun. Anytime. I hope it was useful.
It is very useful.
Even really, for us. Yes.
Want to apply again?
From the beginning this time. So we'll see you guys next Sunday.